Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, welcome to another video. So this week we are going to be talking all about stress. So I did talk last week about a lot of different products and things that you can be using on your face, but to be honest, your skin is only ever going to be as good as your internal health. And I think stress is probably the number one, or at least anecdotally, the number one trigger for people's skin problems. And I actually woke up and have been feeling, recently that my lips are quite dry, and I think it's something to do with the stress of planning my wedding. So this week I'm going to be doing two videos. So this is kind of part one. We're going to be going through what stress is, how it affects our bodies, and how it affects our skin. And then I'm going to be talking more about how we can kind of deal and reduce the feelings of stress. And hopefully by the end of these two videos, I will have changed your mindset around stress as well, because it isn't all bad, I promise. Before we get started, I really appreciate it if you hit the like button. It really helps and supports my channel. If you want to see more videos about holistic skin, hair, and health, then I suggest you subscribe, because I make 3 videos every single week. So first of all, let's go straight into it, back to basics. What is stress? So stress is both an emotional as well as a physical response to a perceived threat or danger. What this meant is, back in the day when we were running around and hunting and gathering for food, is that if ever we encountered a lion or a scary animal, as our bodies would prime us to run away. So the fight or the flight response, which I'm sure most of you have heard by now. So on a kind of basic biological level, what happens is that you see or you perceive the danger or threat in your brain. Your brain then sends a signal to your adrenal glands, which sits on top of your kidneys. So your adrenal glands start pumping out loads of cortisol, loads of adrenaline, and this then circulates through our body really, really quickly and does all sorts of physiological mechanisms. So for example, our heart starts to beat really quickly, our breath becomes quite constricted, our pupils get dilated, our muscles become tense, and essentially we're just primed and ready to fight whatever scary animal or run away. So that is what acute stress does, as in a short-term stress does. And this is a really important and great response. It's essentially what has kept the human species alive for hundreds and thousands of years. So there's definitely nothing bad with the stress response. The problem is now is that our environments have changed. We're no longer running around, we're no longer sort of encountering big scary animals, at least most of us aren't. And because of this, the response that we have to stress becomes a lot less physical, and it becomes much more of an emotional state. But at the same time, all these physical responses and the physical signals that are going around our body are still being pumped out, but it's just that we don't deal with them in the same way. And that can be problematic and lead to something called chronic stress, which is when these stress signals are sent out over a long period of time, and it's usually because the threat or the danger or the response that we're having it to is something like financial problems, work stress, family stress. It will be, if we're a student, we're going through exams, things that we can't fight or run away from. At least most of us can't. So over time, if we are continuously pumping out these stress hormones, it will start to have a damaging effect on our bodies and our tissues and our organs. And that of course includes our skin. So I think it's really important for us to understand what the different physiological mechanisms are of stress on our skin, because that will help us to deal and manage those effects much better. So cortisol is our main stress hormone, and it activates something called glucocorticoid receptors. These glucocorticoid receptors are found pretty much everywhere, all over our body, and that includes our skin. And because of that, that is why adrenaline and cortisol, it has such a big physiological response throughout our entire bodies. So stress also has a number of different effects on our skin, and depending on your particular skin type and your particular stress response, it can trigger a skin reaction. So some of these effects include, firstly, increased permeability of your skin barrier, increased sensitivity of the immune cells in your skin. It also increases something called transepidermal water loss, which is the loss of water or hydration from your skin. It also can increase sebum and oil production in your skin, and it also decreases wound healing. So it makes wound healing a lot slower. So how do these 5 different effects actually manifest themselves on a physical level in our skin? So if you're like myself and you have more of like an allergic or inflammatory skin predisposition, It means that with your increased permeability of the skin barrier, which is when your skin barrier is letting things in and out much more easily, you take that on top of the fact that you have heightened immune cell sensitivity, that is going to make you much more prone to flare-ups to things in your environment and also things, you know, that you are eating and drinking as well. And it's not just eczema, it's also psoriasis, it's also urticaria, which is hives. So all of these things will become much more prone to a flare-up when you are going through a time of stress. The increased transepidermal water loss is basically just dehydrating your skin. Again, if you're like me, you have dermatitis, that is also a dry skin problem. If you don't have dermatitis necessarily, this can still lead to the appearance of fine lines and wrinkles and make your skin look quite dehydrated and flaky and quite dull. If you have a more acne-prone skin type, then the excess production of sebum, which is the main oil in our skin, is going to become a breeding ground for bacteria, which is why you're going to be much more prone to breakouts and pimples when you are feeling a bit stressed. So the thing about stress as well that can be quite problematic is, like I said, it isn't just a physical thing, it is much more of an emotional or a mental state. And because of that, what does tend to happen is that if you have a habit of sort of skin aggravating behavior, so things like scratching and picking, you are much more likely to perform those behaviors when you are stressed out. And especially then if we tie that back to the fact that your skin doesn't heal as quickly, so the wound healing. So if you have cuts, sores, scratches, they're going to take a much longer time to heal when you are stressed. And so if we are picking, scratching, all these things, it is going to prolong the effect that stress has on our skin. So if you know that you have that habit, really do try to resist and just try to leave your skin alone. Because the good news is that all these effects are completely reversible once your stress levels have gone down. So just try and sit through it and ride it out and really just try to resist the urge to, you know, pick and scratch and do any of those things. So of course, stress, it doesn't just affect our skin in isolation, it affects our entire bodies. So some things that can also be quite aggravating for skin problems is that if you're stressed out, you often don't sleep that well, especially if you're having chronic stress. Chronic sleep deprivation, that definitely has an impact on our skin as well as our overall health. Other thing that it does is that it can affect our gut, which is why we get that kind of nervous butterfly feeling. So that goes into our stomach and that affects our digestion. It can upset the gut bacteria. All of these over time can also have quite a negative and damaging effect on our skin and our overall health in general. Now, all that sounds very horrible and scary, and I don't want to freak anyone out now, and especially if you are going through some stress now, because everyone goes through stress. It's just part of life. It's not like you can quit your job or you can stop taking your exams. We have to figure out a way of dealing with stress. So the good news is about stress is that, of course, there are things that we can do to manage it, and that is going to be the topic for my next video. But the other thing is that actually the way that we are affected by stress on a physical level is very much determined by our mindset. But I watched a really interesting TED Talk when I was researching for this video, so I'm going to leave a link to that down below. And essentially what that was saying in summary, it was that the people who saw stress as a very negative thing and a harmful thing for their body, they had a much higher risk of all the negative impacts that stress had on their physical health. Whereas the people who didn't really see stress as harmful, who just maybe saw it as part of the day-to-day lives, they had effective ways of managing that stress, they had absolutely no increased risk of all these negative health impacts that stress could have. So essentially what that is saying is that the way that stress affects our health and our bodies on a physical level is very much determined by our mindset around stress. So instead of seeing stress as this really horrible, scary, negative thing that we have to fight and we have to do everything we can to cut out of our lives altogether, because frankly that is just not possible, we should be seeing it as a really amazing biological and evolutionary response that help us to deal and tackle with whatever challenge it is that we are faced with. And if we have that mindset around stress, and I'm going to go into more practical detail around this in my next video, but if we have that mindset that we are going to decrease and minimize those physical, negative physical impacts that I talked about previously in this video. So that should be a word of comfort for you for the end of this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button. If you want to see my next video, then definitely hit the subscribe button and the bell notification button so you get notified when that comes out. And in the meantime, I very much look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye!